Hello and welcome to today's podcast. My name is Ibukun Itimi and I am the host of the Come Check With Us podcast where we talk about all things engineering leadership and career development in tech.
Hi Ibukun, I have officially worked in tech since 2020, so about 4 to 5 years, and I currently work as a senior front-end engineer. I do want to grow in leadership, but with AI influencing a lot of how we work, I think about how future leaders would need to be equipped to lead teams that would utilize AI to build solutions. If I continue on my path as a senior front-end engineer, would that guarantee a spot for me as an EM in the next 2 to 3 years? So EM being engineering manager. I would like your advice on how I can position myself to transition into EM within this timeline. Also, the global influence, because I don't want to be limited by a job. I want to be able to contribute to the industry, not just my work. So managing a demanding engineering job and prioritizing external opportunities that allow me to contribute outside of work. So this is the question that we're going to be digging in today. If this sounds like stuff that you have asked yourself of late, then this is definitely something that you should be listening to. Hi, my name is Ibukun Itimi and I'm an engineering lead and career coach, and basically someone who's been navigating the ups and downs of building a tech career for the past decade. And I'm pretty much here to share all of that with you so that you don't have to do it alone. So keep listening and join me on today's episode. Alright, as usual, I start off the episode with my reflections of the week. And if you listen to last week's episode, you know that I started talking about rest, and I pretty much, have been thinking more and more about that of late, especially with respect to like how you can actually make that a reality for yourself, because a lot of us talk about rest but we don't do like the most basic thing, which is basically use our PTO. Yes, so taking time off of work, extended periods of time, or even just like taking a few days on the top of a public holiday can definitely make a huge difference for you to just be able to like disconnect from work and spend some time truly resting and reconnecting with yourself. So one thing that I promised myself to do is plan my holidays in advance, especially for next year, get them in the books as well, so that I don't have any excuse as to not taking the holiday when the time comes around, and truly using that time to find opportunities to like recharge, to do things that I love, so that I can continue to show up at work not feeling burnt out and feeling rejuvenated. I know it sounds like a very basic thing, but as a manager, I find myself often having to remind people to like take time off when you're sick, take time off, if you need it. So I know that as simple as it might be to just like put in your PTO and ask for the time off, I know that it's sometimes not that straightforward. There are many reasons why folks might be thinking, oh, maybe I have this project that's going on, or I maybe have a manager that just doesn't encourage time off and stuff like that. I would really say that you should find ways to kind of think beyond that. Like if you have a manager that is not like as encouraging of you taking time off, probably plan way in advance so that they don't have any excuses but to approve your leave. And if you are your own blocker to like taking time off, then figure out what you need to do to feel comfortable with really having that time to rest and really having that time to recharge. So I have a couple of weeks of PTO coming up next month, and I'm super excited to be taking time off, spending time with my family, spending time resting and just doing things that I enjoy. And I plan to do more of that basically. So yeah, that's my reflection and my, I guess, like charge for the week. So going into today's episode, we started off with a question. I feel like this is something that I've been talking about through different ways on this podcast. I think the to lead or not to lead episode a few weeks ago, and then now we're coming back with the same question from one of the folks in the Come Tech With Us community, just really asking, they're getting to that 5-year mark. I've been saying it that like the 5-year mark is a very interesting time for most people in their career. So like getting to that 5-year mark, already a senior, thinking about what do I do next, how do I transition, and also thinking about AI, because I know that's something that a lot of us are actively thinking about with the way the industry is moving. So definitely not questions that are out of place, and definitely not questions that I'm sure they're the only one who are asking these types of questions. I know this is on a lot of us minds, I'm super excited to be digging into that today. So I'll go through, I have my notes, I have my iPad with me. So I'll go through my notes and just kind of talk through, what my reflections of this question are. So wait, the first thing, that I would say, if you're at this point in your career where you are thinking about how do I make the next move, I've seen, maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line, how do I bridge the gap between where I am now and that like 2 year timeline, especially if it's something where you're looking to transition into leadership, you're looking to transition into a different career. The first thing I would say is think about what your motivation is. So clarify your motivation. Why do you want to go into management in the first place for this listener? If you are, have been an IC for a while and you're thinking, okay, I want to move to the next level and being an EM seems to be, the way to do that. That's definitely one of the ways, but not the only way. So you need to be thinking about, why do I really want to go into being, into being a people manager, into being an EM? Because a lot of times when people have this conversation, it's because they see that as the only path. But my very first thing is like, think about what you like to do. Do you, enjoy projects where maybe you have taken on more leadership, or maybe you enjoy projects where you've had to work with other, folks and like mentor them? If those are the types of things that you're seeing now, that you feel like, okay, I can probably make it as an engineering manager, then that's an interesting path to, rather than thinking about it as the only way to grow, in your engineering career. Because there is, the individual contributor track, which is what you're on now, being a senior, and you can grow to kind of be a staff, be principal, and grow down that line. And that is a very valid career path. While there is the people manager path where you grow into being an EM and then you grow all the way to being like director, VP level, type person. So really thinking about what is the motivation, really understanding what are the different paths that exist for me, so that you're not boxing yourself into one thing because you think that's the only way to grow in tech, because that truly isn't. So the first thing I would say is just like clarify your motivation, understand, what your strengths, what the opportunities that you're looking to get are. I have folks who will say to me, I want to do my own thing down the line. So I think, going the leadership route would be really good for me to start to build those skills, because maybe in the future I want to like have a startup, or I want to be at this position. I can understand that motivation and that line drawing between, I know I'm going to eventually be a people leader, I know I'm going to eventually have to kind of think, high level, think strategy, think vision. So I want to start building those skills now. And if that sounds like you, then great. But if what you're thinking of is just growth, then you need to be thinking about what really are the different paths that exist, so that you have a really good understanding of why you're going for one or the other. Now, the second thing that you need to do is to understand your company's career ladder. So there are companies who would encourage your growth from being an IC to being into the people track. So if you're in one of those types of companies, then that's a really good way for you to start understanding what are the criteria for me to actually be able to get to this point. Talking to your manager, reading through the career ladder and expectations, getting feedback to see if you are actually on that track already. Because there are people who come to me and are like, oh, I don't think I would be a good people leader. And when we look at the things that they're already doing versus what is expected of the people track, you can already see some of the traits that they have that would make them a good leader. And there are people who are just like, okay, I only want to be I really just want to be like an engineering manager. And when they read the, expectations of being an engineering manager, they're like, okay, this is a very different, way of working. This is a very different set of expectations. So understanding your company's career ladder helps you, first of all, also kind of clarify that motivation to be like, okay, are these expectations that I want to be, accountable to? That's number one. Number two, is there really a path for me to move? There are companies where they encourage internal mobility. There are companies where they would encourage that transition from ICT. There are companies that even have these like hybrid paths where you're sort of between an IC and a manager, for you to kind of start to take on some responsibility, so that you can start to get a sense of what it's like, see if you like it, and have the opportunity to go back to being an IC if you don't. But one thing that I would kind of encourage anyway is that once you start thinking about, oh, should I be an EM, and seeing that there are certain traits that you have that might make you, excel at that path, or that make you even just interested in the path, I always encourage that, you go ahead and try it out if you have the opportunity within your organization, especially because like you can always, switch paths, right? There is no one size fits all. There is no one career journey where you end up being an EM and do that forever. I've met people who have done that for a while and then go back to being an IC. So if you have all that flexibility within your organization, then that's perfect. It's only a matter of doing the research, speaking to the right people, speaking to your manager, being very clear about the goals that you have and about the opportunities that you want them to offer you as well. Because when your manager knows that, oh, okay, this path exists and this person is interested, they can start to actually give you responsibilities that help you work towards that path. So if you're looking at how can I make this, timeline possible within the next 2 to 3 years to transition, then those are things that you need to start doing now so that you are eventually prepared for the eventuality of, transitioning into being a people manager. The other thing that you also can take advantage of, within your organization is you also might have the opportunity to shadow somebody else, to work with somebody else. I personally benefit from that because when I saw that there were mentorship opportunities with more senior leadership folks, I was like, okay, this is something that I definitely want to jump on. And that has helped me with just having someone to talk to, having someone to run my ideas by, just seeing their own perspective, seeing their own growth. So if your company is where you already have all of this support, it makes sense to start exploring that now. I always encourage thinking about your internal opportunities first because one, you have a very clear goal. You're not expected to just come and jump into the managerial role immediately and start to excel. There is already that expectation that you are transitioning. So you are likely to get the support. You're likely to get the time to grow into the role as well. So really thinking about what are the internal opportunities that I have is a really good way to start. Now, if you don't, see those opportunities within your organization, then that is a different, topic that we'll also talk about. But the next thing that I want to get into is start practicing leadership now. You don't have to wait until you become a lead. Think about it as waiting or being prepared for an opportunity, right? So if you're going to be promoted, even if you're just going from a senior to staff level role, you likely are going to, already be showing those traits before you get promoted. So you show the traits and then promotion comes. So think about, how do I start showing those traits as a leader to be able to, prepare myself for the opportunity to be a lead. Now, what that means is that maybe you don't even have the opportunity to transition within your organization. But if you're already picking up some of these traits, some of these responsibilities, and taking advantage of the opportunities you have now, you might very well be a good fit for an external, role where you're like, oh, I've already done this, and this, even though I haven't officially held a title. These are all the traits that I've had, or these are all the things that I've done that have prepared me for leadership. And I've also had those types of instances in my career as well, where I was already taking on leadership opportunities. I was already taking on leadership roles, mentoring people, thinking about the team, doing one-on-ones. Even if it wasn't an official title, all those skills helped me when I eventually became a manager because I was like, okay, this is something that I'm familiar with. But imagine if I was waiting for, oh, okay, I want to eventually be a manager. And when I become that, I will start practicing. One, the likelihood is that I may not have even gotten those positions, or I may not have even gotten that role because I am not prepared for it. But two, even if I eventually did, I would be learning a lot of things on the job, right, with the pressure of having the title. Whereas because I had taken the opportunity to practice, years before that, and do all these things regardless of the title that I had, knowing that okay, this was potentially something that I want to do down the line, that was very helpful for setting me up, in my very first leadership role. So don't, overthink, oh, I don't have the role now, I don't have the title now. No. What are projects that you can take on that put you in a leadership position? What are, things that you can be involved with? Let's say say you sign up for mentoring more junior engineers. Let's say you sign up for being involved in some hiring stuff that's happening in the company, or you just find these initiatives that may not even be, your own primary role, but that help you build up these leadership skills so that you can start preparing for that future. Remember, we're working with a timeline. I love that you're not expecting to become a manager overnight. I love that you're giving yourself 2 to 3 years. So definitely start looking for those opportunities now because they will, set you up for success in the future. The next thing I'm going to talk about is don't ignore your technical growth, especially because you're giving yourself, this time. if you're, already thinking about AI, then that's something that you want to be figuring out for yourself. Like, how do I build with this? How do I factor this into my day-to-day role? How do I make sure that I'm increasing my skills? Whether that's leveraging AI or, even moving more into like an AI type industry. You want to be able to continue to build on those skills, because those are the things that would help you be a hands-on manager. Those are the things that would help you be able to guide your team and to be able to say, oh, this is my experience in the past. How can we kind of leverage that now? Or how can we learn from those experiences? And you'll be able to like contribute to, your team's technical discussions. You'll be able to contribute to influencing how your team uses AI, because you have that hands-on experience. Especially with the timeline of 2 to 3 years, I would say you need to start thinking about, first, as an engineer, how do you build up on your AI skills, right? Because those are the things that you would go into leadership with, to say, oh, okay, this is how I would also apply AI or this is how the team should be thinking about building with AI. You would be able to, bring ideas or inspire ideas for your team to think about, for your team to work with, so that they also can, be a team that leverage, that use AI as well. So you're very lucky to be in this place where you have that opportunity to build the hands-on experience, instead of thinking about like, how do I, build teams, with AI at this point. The very first thing that you should be thinking about is, how do I, in my current role, leverage AI? Because it is that experience, that hands-on experience, that we would build on, as you go through your career. So whether that is going to deciding later on that you want to continue on as an IC, it means that you can guide your team in that way as a senior lead. Or if you want to, go in to be an EM, then you also can guide your team in that way as well, on like how to build, with AI, how to leverage AI. So do not neglect that like technical part, and don't, overthink it by, paralyzing yourself like, okay, how do I get to the point of building teams with AI? No, it is the same way. If you like, let's even imagine that like there was an AI, right? If you, for example, have been working as a senior front-end engineer and you grow into being an EM for a front-end engineering team, it is still the same like technical experience that you have that would help you and inform the way you lead your team, inform what your team is working on. So that means that like, regardless of the background that you have, you're basically bringing those skills into being an engineering manager, right? So that means that you want to think about, okay, in what way is the industry moving? Are there things that I should be learning now as an engineer and improving and sharpening my skills on, that, those skills would definitely, eventually transfer, as long as you're managing a technical team. So I would say, don't ignore that. Continue to think about how to build with AI, continue to think about how to sharpen your skills. Don't just think about the products as well. Think about how you make yourself more productive, how you make yourself more, more efficient at your role, leveraging AI, because those are things that would be very helpful for you as a manager, because there are a lot of things that, you would end up doing. There's a lot of like documentation that you have to write. There's a lot of thinking about your team's processes and how to help them be more efficient. So the fact that you've done that for yourself just means that you can bring that experience to the table as a manager as well. So the next piece that I'm going to talk about, because we've talked about looking at internal opportunities, I would also talk about like looking at external opportunities. Now, instead of or similar to how we've talked about AI, right? So like, AI is something that's been influenced, industry wide. It's the same way you should think about your role in the scope of the industry. Don't just think about what does my company need, but think about like, what does the industry need of a senior front-end engineer? What does the industry need of an engineering manager? And see how you can start to build up to those skills. So internally, you look at like the career ladder and what your company is expecting. But externally, what I like to do is look at job ads, right? So look at as many job ads as possible on LinkedIn, Indeed, whatever platform you choose. But the thing that you want to start looking at is, what are the expectations of somebody in this role, so that you can start to build a roadmap of things that maybe you need to learn. So as you go through several ads, maybe you can already even fit into, some of these roles that they're trying to fill. But if you don't look at what the industry is looking for, you might end up in a trap where you are working towards your company's career ladder, but missing out on certain key skills that would be very important. So I would definitely encourage you to look at as many job ads as possible, look at other people's, career trajectories as well, not to to kind of compare yourself, but one, to give as a guideline. So one thing that I like to do is like look at several people. Like if people are making, say, manager to like VP in like 10 years, and like that's like the average. Of course, doesn't mean that like you can't make it in less, but it gives you some sort of like check to be like, okay, this might not be an overnight journey. So you can kind of manage your expectations and go at things, a bit steadily. You can also look at the skills that they've built, the experiences that they've had that have led them to that space. So looking at people's career trajectories, talking to people, finding mentors within the industry, that can be very key to just like helping you, get to that level. The other thing I would say is speaking to a coach as well. So somebody who has either made that journey or somebody whose role is basically to help you make that journey. That can also be something that helps you to align yourself to the industry. But then if this is something that you want to do on your own, looking at job ads, looking at what the skills they're looking for are, the experiences, so that you can start collecting those experiences, right? So let's say one of the things that they're saying is that you should have led certain types of projects, you should have led, so and so amount of people. Those are things that you can start to find the opportunities to do within your organization, or even just like external. So let's say, oh, I'm going to, volunteer to work with this startup to get this particular experience, or I'm going to freelance to get this experience, so that when I'm eventually ready for that role, I can kind of draw on the things that I've already done. So you're looking both internally and externally as well at how you can basically continue to ramp up to the role that you want, and giving yourself that timeline or that reasonable timeline to say, okay, can I even do this in 2 to 3 years? Do I have the right opportunities to do this in 2 to 3 years? Or if I were to do this in 2 to 3 years, what are the opportunities that I should be taking today? So remember, we looked at internal career ladders, external job ads, and other people's, journeys. Leveraging, as much support as you can through mentorship, through coaching is also another way to make sure that that 2 to 3 year timeline that you have is either reasonable and realistic, or, that you can kind of, shift your expectations and work towards one that is. Now, the final piece that I will talk about, which I think is really interesting, is, this poster asking about how do I make sure that I have global impact and industry impact, and how do I manage that with the demands of my current role. The thing I will say about this one is you have to be very creative about it. You have to think about what are ways that I can kind of like leverage my current role. Again, use as much of the opportunities that you have now to build up some of this expertise, or to build up some of this like global, relevance, right? First of all, building global relevance, or being relevant in the industry, shouldn't just be for the sake of it. Think about what is really your motivation behind it, right? Because that is what is going to help you to continue to show up, when things are tough, when you have like a demanding project, but then you have to give a talk or you have to write a blog post. So realizing that, okay, for myself, I love to teach, which is one of the reasons why I do this podcast or why I have courses. So I'm like, anytime I start to feel stressed, I think about like the impact, I think about, the people that are learning from the stuff that I'm doing. And that is motivation enough for me to keep going, right? So having that motivation at the back of your mind of like, the reason why I want to do this, or the reason why I want to build this relevance has a deeper meaning than just doing it. That is one way to be steady. Now, the other way that I mentioned on like being creative is you can actually leverage your current role to do that. Like, let's say your company has like certain conferences that they're affiliated to, or, maybe they have roles that are open and there's a conference that you might speak at where, you can use that as an opportunity to talk about what the company does, to talk about the work that you're doing. That is also like a really good way. So one thing that I've done in the past is, let's say my company says, oh, we're sponsoring this conference, right? Or we're sponsoring this activity. Is this something that you want to be involved in? Yes. The reason why is because then when you're taking time out of your current, role or the current sprint or planning to say, oh, I'm preparing for this thing, it's not seen as you're doing something outside of your role, right? You're doing something that also benefits the company and also benefits you as well. So look for those types of like mutually beneficial opportunities where, you can speak on behalf of the company, use that to share the work that you're doing, use that to also build up your relevance and your presence in the industry. And then over time you can think of also opportunities that maybe make it a lot easier for you to show up. A lot of these conferences will actually offer you a fully sponsored trip, or they would offer you preparation for the conference. So they might offer you like a speaking coach, somebody to give you feedback. So it does take a lot of work, but you get a lot of support as well. So if you can look for those types of conferences where you're not just left to do all the work on your own, or opportunities where you're not just left to do all the work on your own, that can also help you with keeping up with that, demanding thing that you're committing to with work as well. The other thing is also just like knowing how to like just like prioritize generally, right? So figuring out like how to make sure that the goals that you have are reasonable, the goals that you have are achievable. So instead of saying I want to do like 10 conferences this year, no, maybe start with one or two. Instead of saying that I want to feature on XYZ, maybe start your own thing where you can do something weekly, bi-weekly, every month. Figure out like what is the smallest way that I can start to build up to this. And the more that pays off, the more you get more comfortable at it. You can either grow, you can expand, you can get more opportunities, but you have to be very clear on the motivation that you have for doing this thing. You have to figure out like what are creative ways that I can probably leverage the current opportunities that I have, and then what are ways that I can incrementally grow to build up global relevance, to build up what the industry is looking for. On the other side of you giving, you have to be also consuming. So attending these conferences, reading books, reading listening to podcasts, listening to things that help you stay abreast of what is going on in the industry. Because very so often we can get caught in our 9 to 5 and feel like, oh, okay, that's how things are done. But realistically, a lot of people are learning, trying new things every day. So how do you continue to expose yourself to that, so that when you show up on that like stage, you are also bringing relevant information as well? So those are the things that I would say with respect to just like building global relevance and being relevant in the global industry as well. So yeah, I hope that all of this has been really helpful. Just to recap, I'll go through what we talked about from start to finish to make sure that you are kind of thinking about how to make your transition from being an IC to being an EM over the next couple of years, a reality. So the first thing that I talked about is to clarify your motivation. So basically get very clear on why you're doing this and the options that you have. The second thing that I talked about is understanding your company's career ladder. So really being able to take advantage of the opportunities that you have in your current role. The third thing is start practicing leadership now. So don't wait for when you finally have the title, but start thinking about what opportunities do I have to practice leadership and to prepare myself for this eventuality. The next thing that I talked about is also figuring out like what does the industry need as well. So don't just look internally, look at the external opportunities that you could get and look at the skills that they are asking for, and then use that as your roadmap to start preparing for that transition. And next would be don't ignore your technical growth. Continue to leverage that, continue to build relevance in your current role, use AI in your current role, because those are the experiences and skills that you will transition with you as you move towards being an EM. And then we talked about exploring the industry impact and relevance by just making sure that you are again leveraging the opportunities that you have now, starting small, and also clarifying your motivation so that you can continue to do this even when it becomes demanding. Now, the final thing that I would say, because in this case, we've been talking about going from IC to being an EM, and a lot of that, when we talk about people management, we talk about leadership. Well, one thing that you need to know as well is that even if you choose to go down the IC path and not necessarily transition to being a people manager, leadership is something that always comes as you go higher in whatever track you choose. So if you're a staff, if you're a principal, you get to the point where you are also influencing the company's direction, you're influencing the team's direction, you're influencing other people's careers. So leadership is not something that is reserved for only people managers. In fact, all the things that I've talked about are also relevant if you're looking to not change, into the people track, but also, continue to go along the IC track. You will be seen as a leader, you will have those leadership, expectations. And so it, again, you need to start, thinking about that. And I love when people think about those things early in their career. I have those conversations with my, engineers as early on in their career as possible, regardless of, what level they are, because I want them to already start practicing those skills so that when they eventually get to that role, when they eventually get that leadership opportunity, it doesn't feel like something that's out of place for them. No, they're already prepared. They've already, practiced with like low stakes opportunities. And by the time they're taking it, they're good to go. So again, this question was in relation to IC to EM growth. But when you think about it on the flip side, like if I'm going from being an IC to a more senior IC, so staff and principal levels, these are also still very relevant, things to think about. So thank you so much for, listening to today's episode. As usual, if, this was helpful, make sure that you follow, subscribe, our socials would be in the show notes as well. And, make sure that you're sharing this with your friends who you think, will find this relevant. And we'll be back again next week. I look forward to chatting with you as usual. And if you are in this boat and thinking about, okay, I need some help, I need some support, definitely reach out. Hello at Comtech with us, to talk to us about career coaching. And if you just have a question that you would love us to answer on the podcast, then reach out as well and we'll be happy to answer. So thank you so much once again, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.